What you carry with you when you see trauma, when you see disturbing things, over the course of your career, actually, I found to become cumulative and almost more difficult than at first, because there's a repetition to the sadness. My love as a storyteller was being in the field. And then when I became editor-in-chief of National Geographic, that was a foundation of the way I looked at the world. I did not have certainly a plan for journalism or photography as a profession. That came with a journalism class with Ron Lovell at Oregon State University. I was the only field photographer who eventually became editor-in-chief. And I was doing my last story for National Geographic when she was 10 years old. She just started picking up my cameras.
My dad edits a lot of my work, and I trust him to help me communicate what I'm trying to say.
What I tell my students is tell a story that no one else can tell. My role now is to help train the next generation of storytellers.
If that video trailer captured your attention, then you are in the right place. Hello and welcome to Oregon State Alumni Travel Talks. I'm John Balva, Executive Director of the OSU Alumni Association. I get to serve as your host tonight as we feature Yellowstone storytelling through art and science. Now in its fourth decade, the OSU Alumni Travel Program gathers alumni, faculty, and friends and connects you to the wonders of the globe in educational group travel. Hey, guess what? Post-pandemic travel is back. Over the next 12 months alone, we will safely host traveling groups of Beavers on a record 42 different excursions. Trips of all sorts always include academic enrichment, combining super fun orange and black school spirit with strong educational learnings. To those joining tonight who have traveled with us, thank you and welcome back. To those still wondering what these experiences are like, join us. We have a blast together. Through these travel talks, we bring the grandeur of the program to you via the magic of Zoom. And wow, is tonight a treat. Two incredible OSU alumni have merged their talents and experiences to showcase one of America's most magnificent treasures, Yellowstone National Park. In that opening video, you just met one of Oregon State's most accomplished alumni, Chris Johns, class of 1974, award-winning photojournalist and former editor-in-chief of the one and only National Geographic magazine. Chris now serves as a strategic advisor to the National Geographic Society, is a member of the editorial advisory council of our own Oregon Stater magazine, and is helping train OSU journalism students through guest lectures, mentorship experiences, and classroom collaborations. Tonight's focus previews our alumni travel trip this upcoming February, where Chris himself will lead our Beaver travelers through Yellowstone National Park. Through his spectacular lens, Chris shows off his passion for Yellowstone, the animals, the indigenous peoples that once called it home, and the land itself. The video trailer we just showed means that Chris has also agreed to work with OSU on a documentary, The Wonder and the Worry, a film currently in production. It's an exploration of family, the craft of photography, and the power of photojournalism to affect change, particularly on its role in celebrating the glories of our natural world and the perils of irreversible global change. Okay, treasure two. Also joining us tonight is another Oregon State alumnus, Distinguished Professor of Ecology, Bill Ripple, Director of the Global Trophic Cascades program. Professor Ripple is known for his research on terrestrial trophic cascades, particularly the role of the gray wolf in North America as a predator and as a keystone species. A highly cited researcher, Professor Ripple is the director of the Alliance of World Scientists, an independent organization with more than 25,000 scientist members that acts as a collective international voice on global climate and environmental trends. Chris, with his camera, and Bill, through his research, tell the story of the importance of conservation and taking care of our ecosystems. And tonight, we join them to explore one of our truest gems, Yellowstone. Chris and Bill, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks, John.
Chris, we will start with you and your lens into Yellowstone. Then we'll ask Bill to explore how this research relates to the park. Those of you who have submitted questions in advance, thank you. Chris and Bill will try to address those along the way, and we will reserve time for direct Q&A. Throughout the program, please feel free to submit questions in the chat box, and we will also try to get to as many of those submissions as we can. Before we're done, we'll wrap this evening up with OSU science documentarian Saskia Madlener, who will preview two films, A Scientist Warning and the aforementioned Wonder and the Worry. As a reminder, this program is being recorded, and we will post it on our Alumni Travel Talks webpage in the coming days. Chris Johns, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for joining us. What I would like to do is share some stories from the creation of Yellowstone and put Yellowstone in historical context. The Grand Prismatic. We called it the Healing Waters. Leo Teton, a member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, recently told Indian Country Today. That's where we went and prayed, cleansed ourselves. We used it as a place to meet, to mingle, to hunt and trade. We've been in that part of the country for eons. Back in the day, that was our Aboriginal hunting grounds. Back in the day, we hunted for subsistence. The Europeans began exploring the Yellowstone area in the early 1800s, but the most influential exploration was done by Ferdinand Hayden. This is a photograph of the Hayden Geological Survey, which went into Yellowstone in 1871. And I would argue that this was the most influential expedition into Yellowstone because of the two gentlemen in the far right. Thomas Moran, a Hudson River accomplished painter, and William Henry Jackson, a very accomplished photographer. And their images helped convince Congress and the public of the importance of protecting Yellowstone. The photographs like this of Mammoth Hot Springs by William Henry Jackson. Thomas Moran's paintings of hot springs. William Henry Jackson. They worked, had a wonderful collaborative relationship during the Hayden Geological Survey of 1871. They captured geothermal activity, in this case, Thomas Moran, that's second to none in the world. Here's a photograph of Yellowstone Canyon. And here is one of Thomas Moran's most famous paintings of Yellowstone Canyon. And here is Yellowstone Lake. So 6 months after they returned, on March 1st, 1872, the images they made helped inspire the creation of the world's first national park, Yellowstone. It was established to be, and I'm going to quote, dedicated and set apart as a public park or pleasuring ground for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. Yellowstone was largely created to protect its geothermal wonders and give everyone an opportunity to visit a place like no other on Earth. But It wasn't smooth sailing. As early as 1875, Lieutenant General Philip Sheridan advocated for military control of the park to prevent the destruction of those wonders and what was left out of that original mission statement, the wildlife. Therefore, there was really no blueprint as to how to run a national park because it was the first one. By February 25, 1883, the situation had become so dire, a letter was published in the New York Sun. The author warned of mammoth mistakes at Yellowstone and urged Congress to stop the killing of bison. Of the 30 million that roamed the Great Plains in 1850, there were only a few thousand left in isolated pockets, such as Yellowstone. He went on to write, their slaughter has been criminally large and useless. The author of that letter in 1883 to the New York Sun was none other than William F. Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill, who happened to be a good friend of Philip Sheridan's. The same year Cody's letter was written, General Sheridan was joined by George Bird Grinnell, a founder of the Boone and Crockett Club, and Missouri State Senator George Vest. Missouri's U.S. Senator George Vest, in an effort to propose the expansion of Yellowstone Park from that original 1872 border and expand it 40 miles to the east and 10 miles to the south. This effort in part was driven by Sheridan's observation, he was an avid hunter, that elk and other migrations extended beyond the park border. As you can imagine, Western politicians opposed the bill largely because railroad interests wanted to develop the park. Senator Vest modified the bill and proposed it 3 more times in the 1880s, but to no avail. So to restore order in 1886, the U.S. Army came in and managed Yellowstone until the creation of the National Park Service in 1960. In a departure from that first statement I read that established Yellowstone, dedicated and set apart as a public park or pleasuring grounds for the benefit and enjoyment of the people, the National Park Service new mission in 1916 was to preserve unimpaired the natural and cultural resources and values of the national park system for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of this and future generations. This photograph illustrates the tension in that National Park Service statement. The folks in this bear traffic jam seem to be enjoying themselves, but this is hardly a safe, healthy, sustainable way to manage wildlife in Yellowstone for this and future generations. And if that's not enough, Yellowstone had bleachers around the park's open pit garbage dump so visitors could watch bears forage in the trash. Here's a National Park Service picture made of that in the early 70s. And Yellowstone was not the only park struggling with this conflicting mandate of protection, conservation, and the enjoyment of people. So the National Park Service commissioned Aldo Starker Leopold, Aldo Leopold's son, to do a report on wildlife management in the national parks. The Leopold report was established in 1963 and said, I quote, "We should not simply protect wildlife through designated protected areas, but also actively maintain and restore populations of native species." A new bear management plan was adopted in 1970 that included the closing of the open pit garbage dump. But 2 of the foremost authorities on grizzly bears, John and Frank Craighead, urged caution in the cold turkey, close the dump approach, and suggested the bears be eventually weaned from a dump so they could return to their natural food resources. This is a current photo of a grizzly bear feeding on a bison carcass. The Craigheads had a point. In 1966, there were 202 grizzlies in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. That's the 22-acre ecosystem that is part of Yellowstone and surrounds Yellowstone National Park. By 1975, that number had fallen to 136. On July 8, 1975, grizzly bears were listed under the Endangered Species Act. And that's one of the great success stories today. There are an estimated 700 to 800 grizzlies in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So let's go back for a minute to that 1963 Leopold report. I said that parks should actively maintain and restore populations of native species, which brings us to the 1995 and 1996 reintroduction of wolves at Yellowstone National Park. And with that development in park history, let's hear from Dr. Bill Ripple. Bill, it's yours.
So today I'm going to talk to you about my research experience in Yellowstone National Park and beyond. This is a journey over the last 24 years. And it was 24 years ago I started in Yellowstone Park. I want to acknowledge my primary collaborator, Dr. Bob Beshta. He's been involved in nearly every aspect of this. And we had 4 Ph.D. students working on the Northern Yellowstone project over the years. I want to acknowledge them too. Okay, it all started in 1998. I was becoming aware of this great Yellowstone mystery. A scientific debate was going on, and that is, why were the aspen trees declining in Yellowstone Park? So here you can see that there are many dead aspen trees, and they're decadent, and there's really not much reproduction and regeneration going on. So back in 1998, my student Eric Larson and I, we took off for the park for the first time. And what we did is we looked at the tree rings in the aspen, and we cored the trees, and were able to find out that aspen stopped regenerating in the 1930s. So then we asked ourselves, so why would that happen? What would happen by the 1930s to shut down aspen? So these are our data with the early 1800s here on the x-axis, all the way over to the right to the late 1900s, and the percent of aspen. So we see a lot of aspen regenerating around the turn of the century, 1900, but then by 1920s and 30s, they declined. Then we have these missing trees. So this is the missing tree mystery, where there's not hardly any young, smaller trees. Well, at that time, I was shocked to find out that the last wolves were killed in 1926. And we just put this hypothesis together that somehow this killing of the wolves might affect the trees. And we call this the trophic cascades hypothesis, where the predator affects the prey and the prey affect the plants. Therefore, indirectly, the predator affects the plants. So it goes from wolves to elk to aspen. And the aspen, when I'm talking aspen, I'm talking about the elk eating just the small ones, the sprouts, as they're very young. So I know some of you might have trouble remembering this term, trophic cascades. So just think of the ripple effect and you'll be okay. So this is what the northern range of Yellowstone Park looked like in the 1970s, the wolf-free period. You'll see lots of elk roaming around and decadent old cottonwood trees without reproduction along the Lamar River here. But as Chris suggested, the wolves were brought into Yellowstone again by reintroduction in 1995 and 1996. So here on the right is Secretary of Interior Bruce Babbitt helping carry a wolf in. The wolves were put in acclimation pens, and then soon after that were released to the wild to do whatever they wanted. well, they immediately started preying on elk. And this is the species, the native prey for wolves. And these wolves are Canadian wolves that were brought in. They're very efficient at killing elk. But I want you to notice that the ravens in this picture, and Chris Johns showed one with the grizzly bear and the bison. Ravens are scavengers and they show up at carcasses. So I want to ask you, the audience, how long do you think it takes for a raven to arrive at a kill site? So just think for a second. I think the research shows about 40 seconds. These are very smart birds. Well, soon after the wolves came on the scene, the elk changed their behavior. This is considered to be part of this term ecology of fear. And the elk numbers dropped dramatically. I think they, before the wolves were there, they were close to 18, 20,000 elk on the northern range. And after the wolves arrived, the elk numbers went down and down and down to all the way to maybe 3,000 to 5,000 elk. So that means their impact on the landscape may be less, and there may be more opportunities for plants to grow taller. Well, let me show you my cabin. I love this cabin. It's over a century old, and I sat in that front chair with Bob Beshta, and we had long, long talks, and it's just a relaxing place to hide out during summer months over the years. So now we ask the question, with fewer elk, will aspen, willow, cottonwood recover after wolf reintroduction? So you can be the judge. I'll show you some before and after pictures. So on the top picture is 1997, soon after wolves are reintroduced. And this is a willow flat on Soda Butte Creek. And you can see by 2001, the willows are starting to grow taller. Then by 2010, they're even growing taller more so and becoming much more of a thicket of willows. And then look at it, what it is by 2018. So this is a what we believe is a trophy cascade, in a good part responsible by the wolf reintroduction. Take a look at this picture of Soda Butte Creek on the left, 1991, and on the right, 2017. So you can see how the cottonwood trees are growing along the bank. So then we ask the question, can wolves change streams? So if there's less browsing on the plants, those plants that protect the stream banks will grow taller and flourish. So here in 2004, you can see on the left side of the stream that the bank is eroding, and you can see the bare soil there. By 2017, it's looking much better. The plants are growing taller, and the stream bank is increasingly becoming stabilized by the plants. And these plants trap sediment and build what we call the insert floodplain. So this is a process of restoration. We call this passive restoration. Let nature take over. Here you can see the top arrows by those two conifer trees. That's just shows that this is a repeat photo from the same spot. And this to me is just a beautiful example of the resiliency of nature. Just give it a chance. And you can look at some of the aspen trees today, and you'll see the big old ones that originated around the turn of the century. And then you'll see this big gap in the canopy, and then you'll see a bunch of small ones growing. So this gap, we think, is due to the wolf absence period. So we think wolves are good for grizzly bears, and we can see that the grizzly bears will scavenge on elk kills. And wolves are good for beaver. So if the when the wolves returned, the willow increased in growth, and beaver need willow for food and dam building. Here's a picture on the northern range of a recent willow pond, or I mean a recent beaver pond, and you can see the willows around, and it's really important to have appreciation for the beaver. And it's not only the front dam you should be able to see. Just looking back of the first pond, and you'll see another dam. So this is a cascade of beaver dams that can be created up and down streams to provide all types of benefits to biodiversity. So are we jumping for joy? Well, not so fast. As a scientist, I want to give you some caveats. The woody plants are recovering in some, but not all areas. In addition to wolves, the grizzly bears and cougars are playing a very important part in predation effects. And this applies for areas outside the park. Large predators like wolves can be difficult to live with and are not appropriate everywhere. Well, this experience researching Yellowstone wolves opened the door for me to study large predators in other parks. So Bob Best and I traveled to Wind Cave National Park, Jasper National Park, Olympic, Yosemite, Zion National Parks. And what we found was astonishing, that the results we saw in Yellowstone held up in these other national parks when large predators were extirpated. So then researching these predators in the other parks opened the door for me to study wildlife in other regions of the world. So that was my next step. And I collaborated with some international authors to ask, what are the 10 most loved animals in the world? And we did a survey to determine that. And then we also asked, how are they faring? Well, here's our results. We've got 10 species. Notice they're all mammals. And these are the 10 most loved animals, wild animals. And unfortunately, they're all threatened with extinction except for the gray wolf. And this is something that really weighed heavily on me. And it had an influence on my next stage, in that seeing the global wildlife endangerment was a real turning point. And that's when I changed from being just a field ecologist doing research to also a science and conservation advocate. Soon after, we published the World Scientist Warning to Humanity, which was published in Bioscience magazine in 2017. And then in 2020 and 2021, we published the World Scientist Warning of a Climate Emergency. And now we're working on the climate emergency publication for 2022. And rather than just featuring how many degrees increase we have in temperature, we're featuring extreme weather to try to get our message across. I also can give you just a brief preview of a new project I have. It's called Rewilding the American West. And that's where we're talking about restoring wolf and beaver populations and retiring livestock allotments across some strategic parcels on federal land in the West. So this is a proposal and a project that I'm working on. There would be many benefits to this simple rewilding of these three things in terms of conservation of biodiversity, of carbon stocks, and fresh water. Let me just show you an example of what that involves visually. So on the left is Hart Mountain with livestock in 1991 and again in 2013 after the removal of livestock. And I've already shown you something similar to this on the left without wolves, on the right with wolves. And then here's a 98 picture without beaver on the left and with beaver on the right. So I think you get the idea. So now I'm going to end by showing the Scientist Warning documentary film trailer.
Right now, they're claiming the Earth is in a climate emergency, and they have more than 11,000 scientists from 150
11,000 scientists
countries.
from around the world have banded together to warn of
untold human suffering if climate change is not addressed.
The lead authors of this study, ecology professor William Ripple. Professor,
Уильям Риппл, автор этой статьи, демонстрирует нам
are these
данные.
other stakeholders going to heed your advice?
And now it's going to be up to decide what to do next.
Seeing this global wildlife endangerment was a turning point in my life, from a field ecologist to a science and conservation advocate.
He never intended to be the voice of saving the planet.
You will see him speaking out in every way he knows how.
So with this, I knew I needed to change.
Many in the scientific community for decades have been a little bit reluctant to speak truth to power. Can we give him a round of applause for speaking truth to power, what he's done?
I wanted to ask you about our scientist warning paper. Do you know of any way I could get that in front of members of Congress? It's 1,500 words, can be read in 8 minutes.
I can put it in the congressional record.
Wow, that would be great. What are you experiencing with this changing climate?
The surface water you really can't drink. People are dependent on the groundwater. But even that is becoming saline because of sea level rise.
You know, you see all this water around you, but you can't drink it. These are the people who are impacted by climate change.
We are now the cause of a mass extinction that now threatens us.
And these rich people aren't sitting idle. They are stopping us taking action. So we're going to have to fight them.
Hey, my name is Bill Ripple, and I'm a scientist.
Okay, I'm ready to hand this off.
Well, thank you, Bill. I'm going to share screen for just a minute here. And we'll talk, what I'd like to talk to you for a minute about, Bill, is truth to power. So let's talk about some truth for a minute relative to wolves. And we've had quite a few questions from our audience about wolves, so let's jump right into it. In recent months, 500 wolves in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho have been killed. 20% of the wolves that range outside Yellowstone National Park have been killed. There are roughly 90 wolves in Yellowstone National Park as we speak. So you've made a very compelling case for trophic cascade and the wolf becoming an integral, valuable part of the Yellowstone ecosystem. How do you feel this killing spree will affect the park and wolf populations in general?
Yeah, Chris, that you're bringing up an important topic here, and this, I think, if let me broaden it up a little bit before we jump into how it affects Yellowstone's wolves. You know, wolves were brought back into this region, the Rocky Mountains, in 1995, and that's not very long ago when you consider how big of a change this means for society to start living with wolves after we spent so much time and effort to eradicate them in the early part of the 20th century. So we're in the early stages of wolf recovery, and we're on a bumpy road right now. Things are really disturbing, and I'm highly disturbed to see this much wolf killing going on when I just don't see a good rationale for it. So to me, it seems political and unwise. And I think another thing I've been thinking about is humans need to have a tolerance for wild animals. It might be inconvenient sometimes, but if we lose all the important big wild animals, especially the predators, what do you think is going to happen? it's just it sends us down a spiral of an impoverished road. So I'm concerned about where this is going right now, but I think in decades to come, this will be in the rearview mirror. What do you think?
Well, what's interesting about it, and of course, this is, I think, one of the many reasons you and I love to be associated with Oregon State University, is that we all of us need to be educated, and all of us need to look at science seriously and try to absorb what science teaches us. But to even go beyond that in the wolf situation, here's an interesting statistic. It is estimated that more than $30 million a year is brought into the Yellowstone region just from wolf watchers. To put that into perspective, 4.8 million people visited Yellowstone last year. The benefit to the local economy at Yellowstone is $560 million a year. So it's a huge economic driver too. So it's interesting to bring up those statistics, because what's happening with wolves is not in the best interest of those surrounding communities in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho near the park. And you know, that gets to a when we were doing the Yellowstone issue for National Geographic magazine, the entire magazine in May of 2016 was devoted to Yellowstone. I talked a lot to Dave Halleck. You know Dave, I'm sure, the chief biologist who now's at the Outer Banks. But he talked to me a lot about social carrying capacity.
Yeah, tell me what you've learned about social carrying capacity.
Well, you know, that's what people will tolerate who live on the front line of dealing with wolves. And there's been a tremendous amount of progress in many ways for people understanding the benefit of large predators, as you've expressed, Bill. But there have been some political moves, especially in my current home state, Montana, that have really loosened hunting regulations. In fact, they're really, in many cases, not just hunting regulations, they're killing regulations. And there's this odd hatred of wolves. And, you know, it goes back to misinformation too, that these wolves are super wolves that the federal government brought in, which of course is nonsense. I mean, those wolves came from about 795 miles north of Yellowstone, and the wolf OR7 walked across Oregon from northeastern Oregon into California and traveled 4,500 miles in about 9 years. So, you know, but that's just an example of sort of the misinformation that has come out there. And what are your thoughts about how we combat that kind of misinformation, because it deeply affects the social carrying capacity, what people are willing to put up with when they live with large carnivores? Yeah, well, that's a tough problem. I don't have any magic wand. I think I want to echo what you said early on, is that the main thing we can do is educate, and we should try to educate other people about the facts, and especially as academics. But I wanted to also mention some of the viewers were asking about how this affects Yellowstone Park's wolves. They're protected in the park, but when they leave the park, they can get shot. And I think the park lost about 20% of their wolves in recent times with this new killing spree. And that is very disturbing, because a wolf is a very social animal, and they have their family structure known as a pack, and they have the alpha that is in charge of the pack. So what happens if the alpha gets shot? What happens to the social structure of the pack? So that's one disturbing thing. And then on top of that, the wolves in Yellowstone Park are some of the most studied wolves any place in the world.
And this is a long-term study, and it's really, really important to preserve those wolves, just at least in one place, the world's largest national park.
I need to step in and talk a little bit about the photography that we're showing right now. Chris, I assume these are your shots, yes?
I wish they were.
Okay, so can you describe a little bit about what we're looking at? And also,
sure.
As a photographer, what is it like to be standing that close to a wolf that is staring down your lens? Could you just bring this to life for us, please, that experience?
Sure, great question, John. This photograph is made by David Gutenfelder, and on the left is a very dedicated wolf researcher, certainly one of the world's wolf experts, Doug Smith. He's coming into a collared wolf to check on it and take some blood, etc. This picture right here was taken by Ronan Donovan. This is quite a long lens. What I would say is, let's see, the last time I saw a wolf was this winter on the northern edge of the park in the Tom Miner Basin. And I was probably maybe 50 feet from the wolf. I was on snowshoes with my son and another friend of mine who's a biologist. And wolves will stop and look at you. It is one of the most remarkable animals to have eye contact with that I can think of. And they look at you with almost a defiance, like, well, what are you doing here? This is my home. They are one of the most magnificent animals I've ever seen and photographed, but they get themselves into trouble. There are solutions for mitigating human-wildlife conflict with wolves. And that's all part of the good work that Bill's done, Bob Becht has done, and other scientists. But Yellowstone is truly one of the wildest places left in North America, and to visit it is an absolute pleasure. And in the wintertime, when we're taking our trip, that's actually the best time of year to see wolves, because they have a big edge in hunting in the snow. They're really well adapted for that. So in the Lamar Valley, with the help of dedicated park professionals like Rick McIntyre and others, I can't guarantee anything about wildlife photography because, that's the beauty of wildlife photography. There are no guarantees, but there's a, high probability that you get to see wolves.
So early on in your slides, you showed some pictures from the early 70s of probably the downside of tourism in Yellowstone. Tourism remains, you said earlier, the importance of it is to the region. We're going to go together in a less than a year. Where are we now in terms of the role of tourists in the park, how it's affecting the ecology of the park, how it's affecting wolves and elk and beavers and others? Talk about the role of mankind there.
Bill, I'll kick that over to you. That's a great question, John.
Yeah, I don't have a complete answer to John's question, but I think that all the parks are coming under intense pressure. Some of them are you have to have a reservation to get into a glacier now. So and you have to get into Zion Canyon in Zion Park, you need to ride a shuttle bus. So the parks are just bursting with people, and we are starting to see these methods of limiting how many people all at once are in the park and on the roads. But the park is generally protected land, so a lot of the impacts are happening right near the roads and in the developed areas. There's still in Yellowstone, there's huge amounts of wilderness that very few people see. And I would encourage the viewers today to go there and get away from the roads. If you get a chance, stop, park your car, and get out and start walking. It's best to go in groups because of the grizzly bears if you're there when they're not hibernating. And one time I was just walking way back in the wilderness, and all of a sudden a wolf pack started. I was measuring willow trees, and a wolf pack walked right up next to me, and they filed right past me. And the last wolf in the string turned around and looked me in the eye, just like Chris Johns was explaining. And that is a feeling that I'll never forget. And then the wolf jumped up on his front two paws and jumped up once and gave me a little bark, and then caught up with the rest of the pack. So there's all kinds of great opportunities. I think the people going out there now have a good opportunity to see wildlife and to think about the problems that humans are causing, but just to really to relax and enjoy it. Does that help, John?
Well, I can assure our viewers that are thinking about going on this trip with us, I don't know that we're going to get as close as that.
No.
I know I don't want to get that close. But wow, it just gives you chills to think about experiences like that. So thank you both. And I want to just give a shout out as to how we can do this together. So if this has inspired you to think about going in the winter and seeing some of what Chris and Bill are talking about, you can find that information at our website, which our team will put into the chat. And you can see that fororegonstate.org with our travel site, and you can sign up there. The spaces are still open, but not for very long. I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time to talk about the two documentaries that have been mentioned so far in this hour, and bring in our valued colleague, Oregon State Productions documentarian, Saskia Madlander, who has been working with both of you on the types of work that you're doing. So Saskia, welcome. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about Scientist Warning and the Wonder and the Worry.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks, John. Thanks, Bill and Chris. We've been working with Bill and Chris in different capacities for a long time. Bill since 2018. And we are in the final editing stages of the Scientist Warning, which was formerly the second warning. So that's what you saw in that teaser. And now we've decided to call it the Scientist Warning to be a little bit clearer about our messaging. So we followed Bill for the last 3.5, 4 years on a presentation circuit. And then as he has moved into science advocacy. And then we started with Chris late last summer or early fall, back in his hometown, and then traveling around Southern Oregon, Northern California. Then we met up in Montana. So we're in the production and post-production phases of the Wonder and the Worry. And so as we're finishing one film, we're ramping up this other film. And it's really cool to see both subjects at the same time on a talk about Yellowstone and the importance of apex predators and conservation, and most importantly, the role of documentation and imagery and storytelling in conservation. So that is one of the, this is maybe one of the subliminal, or maybe one of the obvious messages of both films, is that storytelling and science communication is really important in conservation work. So I'm just going to give you a little preview here of the editing efforts for the Scientist Warning. We hope to submit it to festivals this Friday. And then, as I said, the Worry and the Wonder, the Wonder and the Worry, we hope to have that finished by spring of 2023. So I'm just going to flash our project page for that. We are a team on campus. I hope you can see this. We're a team on campus of 4 professional filmmakers and video producers. And on films.oregonstate.edu, you can see a list of our longer pieces. And so you can see the Wonder and the Worry is up there on feature. So feature length is 90 minutes, I believe, and above. Whereas the Scientist Warning, which is still listed there as the second warning, is a 35-minute piece, and we'll also cut down to a 26.5 or 28-minute piece for a PBS launch, hopefully, fingers crossed. And if you go to the Wonder and the Worry page, you can read a little bit more about it, see the trailer again, and then we also have an opportunity to donate to the film. So I can't stress enough the importance of storytelling in this kind of, in raising awareness, but also changing some minds in what is ultimately a very polarizing issue, right? The protection of wildlife and the welfare of animals. And so at National Geographic and we as filmmakers, we're all working towards shedding light and literally illustrating these issues with imagery. And so it's tough work for National Geographic. There are journalists who are, risking their lives in the field in war-torn areas, but also working with wildlife and providing this window that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. So I really, I've learned so much the past 3.5, 4 years since I joined the staff here and since I started working with Bill. And sorry, that's my dog here who's actually a Malamute, so not far from the wolf. So those are our timelines, and we'd really, appreciate some donations to the Worry and the Wonder and the Worry. And whereas the Scientist Warning, we're close to finishing that up. So if there are any questions about the films or more questions for Bill and Chris, I'll throw it back to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia. This is incredible work. And to all of you watching, this is your university in action. Saskia and her colleagues documenting what science is happening in the field, documenting the spectacular research and the art and science that colleagues like Bill and Chris bring to forward. So Chris and Bill, I'm going to ask you to come back on screen. Thank you, Saskia. And see if there's last words that either one of you want to share. What have you not said yet that we all want to hear about the beautiful Yellowstone?
Well, Yellowstone is as Bill and I have suggested, was the world's first national park. And the opportunity to spend time in this place, especially with all the great scientists that's gone on there, to see the geothermal activity, which is second to none, to spend the time with wildlife and people who passionately care about wildlife is, I've had the privilege of photographing a great deal all over the world, and I have no place I love more than Yellowstone. So, I'm hoping as many of you as possible can join us there.
Yes, I echo those words from Chris, but what I would say is if you're really interested in seeing gorgeous scenery and great wildlife, go to Yellowstone, take the trip, join the group, go. And the one thing that I want to say is wolves have been seen every day in Yellowstone since they've arrived by someone. And if you go to the northern range and you go early in the day or late in the day, there's a chance you'll see some. And there are people standing on little hills all around the road with their scopes and binoculars looking for wolves. And it is a culture. And Chris was mentioning the tourism on wolf watching is just huge. And I've made great friends standing on those little hills watching the wolf drama play out. And there are people know the names of the wolves, and they know where they're going and where they're coming from. And it's not only a wildlife viewing experience, it's an experience of a lifetime where sometimes I didn't know which way to look, left or right or front or back. There's something happening in each direction. So it's very special, and no place like it on Earth.
Well, I imagine that everyone that signed in to come to tonight's session feels similarly and has some experience either in being in Yellowstone themselves or the desperate dream to get there. And so now's your chance. And we at the Alumni Association are thrilled to bring it to you this evening. Thank you to Saskia. Thank you to Bill. Thank you to Chris, all alumni, all proud Beavers. And we are grateful for your time tonight, for the work that extends the outcomes and the impact of our great research university. So thank you to the three of you, and to all of you who have joined tonight. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for your support and engagement with Oregon State. I'd love to thank my colleagues Kate and Mary who put this on tonight. Always great travel work. And at that, go Beavers. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. Take care.